There is a strange moment every INFJ knows. Nothing is said. Nobody raises their voice. The room even looks calm. But something feels different. The energy changes. A smile lasts 1 second too short. A message feels colder than before. Your intuition notices tiny details that other people ignore. And deep down, you begin asking yourself one quiet question. Do they secretly dislike me? Most people think dislike always looks obvious. But it usually does not. Especially around INFJs. Because INFJs are emotionally observant, empathic, reflective. People rarely confront them directly. Instead, dislike appears in subtle behaviors. Quiet distance, hidden irritation, passive emotional walls. And because INFJs naturally search for harmony, they often ignore these signs for too long. Until one day, the truth becomes impossible to avoid. In this video, we will explore 12 powerful signs someone secretly dislikes you. Not dramatic signs. Not loud signs. Quiet signs. The kind INFJs notice in silence. If you are an INFJ personality type, highly sensitive person, empath, or deep thinker, this video may explain experiences you have carried for years. And by the end, you may finally understand why some people slowly pull away without ever saying a word. 1. Their warmth disappears when nobody else is watching. One of the clearest signs someone secretly dislikes you is inconsistency. Especially emotional inconsistency. In public, they seem warm, friendly, polite, maybe even supportive. But when nobody else is around, the warmth fades. The energy changes immediately. Their voice becomes flatter. Their eye contact disappears. Their responses shorten. And suddenly, you feel like you are bothering them simply by existing. INFJs notice emotional shifts faster than most people. They may not always understand why they feel uncomfortable, but they feel it. They feel when kindness becomes performance. Because real warmth stays consistent. Even in private, someone who genuinely likes you does not completely transform depending on the audience. But someone hiding resentment often protects their image carefully. They want to appear kind, especially in social settings. So the dislike only appears in quieter moments. This can confuse INFJs deeply. Because INFJs often give people the benefit of the doubt. They wonder if they are overthinking, too sensitive, too intuitive. But repeated emotional coldness is rarely imaginary. Human behavior always leaks the truth eventually, especially in moments where people stop performing. And INFJs are unusually skilled at noticing who becomes emotionally absent when there is nothing to gain. 2. They subtly dismiss your thoughts and feelings. Dislike is not always aggressive. Sometimes it appears through minimization. A person secretly disliking you may constantly make you feel emotionally smaller. Not openly. Quietly. You share an idea. They barely react. You express excitement. They change the topic. You explain something meaningful. They answer with dry indifference. Over time, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Your inner world feels unimportant around them. For INFJs, this hurts deeply. Because INFJs communicate with emotional sincerity. They usually speak after careful reflection. So when someone dismisses them repeatedly, it feels less like disagreement and more like emotional rejection. Sometimes the person will even disguise the behavior as humor. They tease your interests, mock your intensity, roll their eyes at your idealism, or treat your emotional depth as unrealistic. But underneath the surface is often irritation. People who secretly dislike someone frequently struggle to validate that person's perspective, especially if the other person possesses emotional intelligence they do not understand. INFJs often intimidate emotionally disconnected people, not through force, but through depth. And some individuals respond to depth with subtle dismissal, because acknowledging your value would require emotional honesty from them. And honesty is uncomfortable for people carrying hidden resentment. 3. They only contact you when they need something. This sign is painfully common for INFJs. Because INFJs are natural helpers, natural listeners, natural emotional support systems. People often come to them during crisis, confusion, heartbreak, loneliness. And INFJs usually give everything. Their time, their attention, their emotional energy. But eventually, a quiet realization appears. The relationship only moves in one direction. The person contacts you when they need comfort, advice, validation, help, but disappears when you need the same support in return. This does not always mean hatred, but it often reveals emotional self-interest. And in many cases, hidden dislike. Because people who genuinely care about you stay emotionally curious about your life too. They ask questions. They check on you. They remember details. They notice your emotional state. But someone secretly disliking you may still use your empathy while remaining emotionally detached from you as a person. To them, your value becomes functional, not relational. You become useful, not loved. INFJs frequently miss this dynamic at first because they naturally focus on giving. They assume emotional effort will eventually become mutual. But emotionally healthy relationships feel balanced, not transactional. And one of the saddest moments for an INFJ is realizing someone only appreciated their emotional labor, not their humanity. For, they compete with you in strange and subtle ways. Secret dislike often hides behind competition, especially invisible competition. The kind nobody talks about openly. You share good news. Instead of celebrating with you, they immediately mention their own success. You talk about growth. They suddenly become defensive. You receive attention. Their mood changes. INFJs usually avoid rivalry. They are rarely trying to dominate others, which makes this behavior especially confusing. Because INFJs often assume relationships are emotionally collaborative, not competitive. But some people feel threatened by calm authenticity, threatened by emotional intelligence, threatened by creativity, threatened by quiet confidence. INFJs can unintentionally trigger insecurity in people who rely heavily on external validation. And instead of admitting insecurity honestly, those individuals begin competing silently. You may notice subtle one-upmanship, passive criticism, strange tension after your achievements, or emotional distance whenever your life improves. Real support feels peaceful. You do not have to shrink your joy around emotionally safe people. But someone secretly disliking you often struggles to witness your happiness without comparing themselves. And comparison slowly poisons connection, especially when admiration turns into resentment. 5. They give backhanded compliments. Backhanded compliments are one of the oldest forms of hidden hostility. The words sound positive, but the emotional feeling underneath sounds sharp. You cut your hair. They say, it actually looks good now. You accomplish something meaningful. They say, I never expected you to pull that off. You become more confident. They say, you are so different lately. Every sentence carries a hidden sting. And INFJs feel those hidden emotional layers immediately. Because INFJs naturally observe tone, micro-expressions, energy shifts, emotional contradiction. Sometimes they notice hostility before they consciously understand it. People who secretly dislike you often struggle to offer pure encouragement. Their resentment leaks into language. They may smile while criticizing you, laugh while undermining you, praise you while subtly reducing your confidence. This creates emotional confusion, especially for highly sensitive people, because the interaction sounds technically kind, but emotionally unsafe. And over time, repeated backhanded compliments slowly damage emotional trust. You begin second-guessing yourself, wondering whether you imagined the negativity. But healthy relationships do not leave you emotionally drained after receiving praise. Genuine support feels clean, not poisoned. 6. They avoid genuine eye contact and emotional presence. Eye contact reveals more than words, especially consistent eye contact. Someone secretly disliking you may physically remain near you while emotionally withdrawing completely. They seem distracted, detached, disconnected. Their attention drifts constantly. Their responses feel automatic, and conversations feel strangely empty. INFJs notice presence, not just words. They sense when someone is mentally absent, emotionally checked out, or internally resistant. Many people can fake politeness. Few people can fake emotional presence for long periods of time. When someone genuinely values you, they engage. They listen carefully. They respond naturally. There is emotional openness. But hidden dislike often creates subtle avoidance. The person may avoid sustained eye contact, avoid vulnerable conversations, avoid emotional closeness. Not because they are shy, because emotional connection feels uncomfortable to them, especially with someone they secretly resent. INFJs often internalize this behavior. They wonder if they said something wrong, if they became too intense, too emotional, too thoughtful. But emotionally mature people communicate discomfort honestly. Emotionally avoidant people communicate through distance. And distance always tells a story eventually. 7. They become strangely irritated by your authenticity. One of the most painful truths INFJs learn is this. Not everyone appreciates authenticity. Some people feel exposed by it. INFJs tend to value depth over performance, meaning over status, emotional truth over social masks. And while this attracts emotionally mature people, it can deeply irritate emotionally guarded individuals. A person secretly disliking you may react negatively whenever you express sincerity. They may mock your optimism, dismiss your compassion, criticize your introspection, or become uncomfortable when conversations become emotionally real. This often happens because authenticity challenges people who hide behind emotional walls. Your openness reminds them of their own disconnection. Your self-awareness reminds them of avoided truths. And instead of becoming inspired, some people become defensive. INFJs frequently experience this in workplaces, friendships, even families, especially in environments built around superficial interaction. The INFJ personality type naturally searches for emotional meaning, but people who secretly dislike emotional depth often interpret this as weakness, or intensity, or awkwardness. In reality, many of them simply feel uncomfortable around sincerity because sincerity requires vulnerability, and vulnerability terrifies emotionally closed people. 8. They exclude you in subtle social ways. Not all exclusion is obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, calculated, almost invisible. You hear about plans after they happen. People stop including you in conversations. Messages receive delayed responses. Your presence feels tolerated instead of welcomed. Nobody says anything directly, but you slowly feel yourself drifting outside the emotional circle. This is especially painful for INFJs because INFJs value emotional belonging deeply, even when they enjoy solitude. INFJs often need very few people, but they need sincerity. And subtle exclusion attacks emotional safety. People who secretly dislike you may avoid direct conflict. So instead, they create quiet distance. They reduce invitations, reduce interaction, reduce warmth, until eventually the relationship fades without explanation. Sometimes this happens because your energy does not match the group dynamic, especially if the group relies on gossip, surface-level validation, or emotional dishonesty. INFJs often disrupt shallow social systems simply by being emotionally perceptive. And emotionally immature people may respond through exclusion instead of honesty. But here is an important truth. Being excluded from unhealthy environments is not always rejection. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes losing shallow connection creates space for authentic connection. And INFJs usually discover this later, after the loneliness passes. 9. They seem happy when you fail. This sign reveals hidden resentment more clearly than almost anything else. Watch how people respond to your struggles. Not publicly, privately. Someone secretly disliking you may appear unusually calm during your pain, or subtly energized by your setbacks. They may disguise it carefully, but emotionally, there is relief. Your failure comforts their insecurity. This can appear through tiny reactions. A slight smile, reduced empathy, sudden emotional distance, or a strange eagerness to discuss your mistakes. Healthy people do not enjoy watching others collapse, especially people they care about. Emotionally mature individuals may hold you accountable while still protecting your dignity. But hidden resentment often reveals itself during vulnerable moments. Because pain changes social hierarchy, and insecure people sometimes feel safer when strong individuals become weaker. INFJs are particularly vulnerable to this dynamic because they often hide their own suffering gracefully. People assume INFJs are emotionally stable all the time, wise all the time, strong all the time. So when INFJs struggle, certain individuals feel strangely validated. as if your humanity finally makes them comfortable. But real connection does not require your downfall. Real friends do not emotionally feed on your pain. And people who secretly dislike you often reveal themselves most clearly when life becomes difficult. 10. They gossip about you while acting kind to your face. This behavior is incredibly common, especially in emotionally immature environments. A person may smile warmly at you, support you publicly, agree with you directly, then criticize you the moment you leave the room. INFJs usually sense this before they confirm it. Something feels off. Conversations feel rehearsed. Compliments feel artificial. The emotional atmosphere feels divided. Because gossip creates energetic inconsistency. And INFJs naturally notice emotional contradiction. People who secretly dislike you often avoid direct confrontation. Not because they are peaceful, because they fear accountability. So instead, they manage perception socially. They build quiet alliances, spread subtle negativity, question your intentions indirectly, or distort your personality through selective storytelling. This can deeply wound INFJs. Because INFJs usually value honesty, even difficult honesty. They would rather hear painful truth than perform fake harmony. But emotionally manipulative people prioritize social control over authenticity. And gossip becomes a tool, especially against people who refuse superficial behavior. If you constantly feel emotionally unsafe around someone despite their polite behavior, trust that feeling carefully. Your nervous system often recognizes inconsistency before your conscious mind explains it. 11. They invalidate your intuition. INFJs possess unusually strong intuition. They notice patterns, motives, emotional shifts, unspoken tension. And because of this, many INFJs spend years doubting themselves, especially when other people repeatedly dismiss their instincts. Someone secretly disliking you may constantly make you question your perception. They say you are imagining things, too emotional, too sensitive, too deep, too analytical. But often, these statements are attempts to weaken your confidence in your own awareness. People become uncomfortable around emotionally perceptive individuals, especially when those individuals notice hidden behavior. So instead of changing their actions, they attack your perception. This can create profound confusion for INFJs. Because INFJs naturally self-reflect constantly, they already question themselves deeply. And emotionally manipulative people exploit that tendency. But intuition is not irrational. It is pattern recognition. It is accumulated emotional observation. It is your subconscious mind processing information faster than language. That does not mean intuition is always correct. But repeated emotional discomfort deserves attention, especially when the same patterns continue appearing. One of the most healing moments for an INFJ is realizing they were not imagining the emotional tension all along. They were simply perceiving what others refuse to acknowledge. 12. You feel emotionally exhausted after every interaction. Perhaps the strongest sign someone secretly dislikes you is this. Your body feels it. Your nervous system feels it. Your energy changes around them. You leave conversations feeling drained, heavy, anxious, overly self-aware. Even when nothing openly negative happened. INFJs absorb emotional atmosphere intensely. They process tone, energy, unspoken emotional information. And when someone secretly carries resentment toward you, your nervous system often notices before logic does. This does not mean INFJs should distrust everyone, or assume rejection constantly, but emotional exhaustion matters, especially repeated exhaustion. Healthy relationships usually create emotional regulation, safety, calmness. Even difficult conversations can feel grounding when mutual respect exists. But hidden dislike creates tension beneath the surface. You begin monitoring yourself constantly, adjusting your words, analyzing reactions, trying not to disturb the emotional atmosphere. And eventually, simple interaction becomes emotionally tiring. This is often the moment INFJs finally recognize the truth. Not because of one dramatic event, but because their inner peace disappears repeatedly around the same person. Your emotional state is information, not weakness. And emotionally safe relationships should not require endless self-erasure. Here is how to protect your peace as an INFJ. First, trust repeated patterns, not isolated moments. Everyone has difficult days. But consistent emotional tension matters. Second, stop chasing emotional clarity from emotionally unclear people. Some individuals benefit from keeping relationships confusing, because confusion gives them emotional control. Third, pay attention to how your body reacts around certain people. Your nervous system stores emotional information. Tension, anxiety, exhaustion, hypervigilance. These reactions deserve attention. Fourth, stop over-explaining your sensitivity. Sensitivity is not weakness. Emotional intelligence is not weakness. Depth is not weakness. The right people will not punish you for feeling deeply. And finally, remember this. Being disliked by emotionally unhealthy people is not failure. Sometimes authenticity naturally creates distance from environments built on superficial connection. And while loneliness hurts, pretending to be someone else hurts even more. Not everyone who smiles at you loves you. Not everyone who stays near you values you. And not every relationship deserves unlimited emotional access to your inner world. INFJs often spend years learning this lesson. Because they naturally search for goodness in people, potential in people, healing in people. But emotional maturity also means recognizing when connection no longer feels safe. When kindness becomes performance. When warmth becomes conditional. When your spirit feels smaller around someone instead of calmer. You do not need everyone to understand you. You do not need everyone to like you. And you do not need to abandon your authenticity to become emotionally acceptable. The right people will not fear your depth. They will value it. They will not punish your sensitivity. They will protect it. And they will not make you question your worth through constant emotional confusion. So if these signs felt familiar, do not panic. Do not become cynical. Simply become more aware, more intentional, more protective of your peace. Because your intuition was never meant to trap you in fear. It was meant to guide you toward emotionally healthy connection. And sometimes, the quiet discomfort you feel around certain people is not anxiety. It is wisdom. If this video resonated with you, remember to like, subscribe, and share this with another INFJ who may need to hear it. And in the comments, tell us this. Which sign have you experienced the most in your own life?